Why do the wicked people get away with stuff? Because that's, part of it. That's the other side of it. So why do people who are not doing good things seem to get away with stuff? Which again makes for some difficult questions. And so again, for those who were not here, I definitely were not here last week. I definitely recommend going back and reading the introduction. Go back and read the first couple of chapters, because what we're reading now is the after the first couple of chapters of opening, we get into Job's friends who come to him and at first say nothing to him, but eventually, after he gives a speech, a monologue, they respond. And we read the first friend so far. We read his first friend, Eliphaz, who speaks up. Now we're into the next friend, Bildad, um, and so we have one more friend after that. Then we have another guy who's going to come kind of out of nowhere and start talking. Um, but hold off on that because we're not going to probably get to him today. Um, so when we again, Job, his name has become synonymous with suffering, with righteous suffering in particular. Somebody who doesn't deserve to be suffering. And so we know that from the outset. The book has told us that. The prologue has told us that this is a test that Satan, Hasatan, the adversary, has challenged God to see if one of God's favorites can can make sense of this, and it and that's what we're dealing with right now. So far we've heard Job essentially say, "Hey, I haven't done anything to deserve this, and I'd like to die. I don't understand why I'm here. Please take me out of this." And and that's kind of where we're at, unless somebody wants to add something else that they feel that they've heard actually so far. I don't want to, again, I mean, a lot of us know the way the story ends, so suspend that as you read it. As we read this, read it like you're reading it for the first time if you can, and try to imagine you don't know how this story ends, and as you're in the midst of it, as if again, if you've ever gone back and read something or watched a movie that you've already seen, or step back into something just to experience it again, um, experience it. And again, if anybody wants to add anything, please. The poetry, the words in this are quite powerful. They're quite beautiful. We mentioned last week that some of Eliphaz's comments, his praise of God and God's majesty and God's greatness and God's system, which is beautiful, are words that we've read already in Psalms. And so when we look at these beautiful words, which I mentioned ironically, we really can't quote because they're said by people to kind of shame Job. We're kind of caught because we really can't quote these wonderful things because they're said by people who are, well, I don't want to give it away, but they're wrong. But in their being wrong, they're essentially quoting traditional Jewish wisdom and traditional Jewish theology, if you will, belief and statements about God. So this is the second friend, number two. Yes, Mike, before we start. In the Tanakh, yeah. So there are people who are challenged by this book. And as I mentioned before, Maimonides wanted this book to just be a parable, to be a fantasy, if you will, not to be taken literally. Um, because while he appreciated the philosophy of it, he couldn't really grasp how this could actually have happened. No, it was already Maimonides lived about 1,000 years after it was canonized, 900 years. Yeah. So you're talking about somebody who lived long after the book was already there, after Christians had already made it part of their religion, too, their canon and their theology. and Muslims for that matter, because Maimonides lived at a time when Islam was. He actually lived in a predominantly Islamic society in North Africa, Spain and North Africa, and so he dealt with Muslim theologians and Muslim religion at the time, Muslim scholarship, and yeah, so he had a problem with the parts of this that are irrational. He had no issue with the philosophical questions. He had no issue with the philosophy of it necessarily, the challenge of it, which is sort of legitimate, challenging questions. But he had a real problem with God doing this. Yeah. What? Yeah. So Maimonides is considered kind of, to some extent, the preeminent Sephardic rabbi. He's not the only, obviously, great Sephardic rabbi that we still quote. There's Nachmanides, who lived around the same time of him. Uh,
So
Rabbi Yosef.
Maimonides is more logical,
Yeah,
where Rashi is
exactly.
more mystical.
Yeah. Well, Rashi's not more mystical. Rashi is more literal. Rashi again was a Ashkenazi rabbi from France, from the Ashkenaz area, around the same time as Maimonides, a little bit earlier. But his main thing was just to explain things, to try to translate and try to make people understand it.
So how did he explain that?
Maimonides tried to rationalize the Bible. He tried to rationalize Jewish theology. He tried to make Judaism a rational religion and one that, again, could compete with the rational versions of Islam and Christianity that was also very popular in North Africa at the time, which was let's try to let's try to get to the um, let's try to get to the most rational levels of religion where we're not talking about, you know, donkeys that talk and seas that part, but what's the underpinnings? What are the rational underpinnings to a system that's a rational system, closed system where the system works? It's based on kind of what Maimonides was dealing with were people who also were trying to synthesize Greek philosophy and the Aristotelian kinds of systems where people said, come on, there's got to be a system here. There's got to be some kind of underpinnings of things that, you know, that follow order. So, you know, Maimonides searched for that. He tried to get that. And Rashi is not concerned with that. Rashi, if something is miraculous and something happens in the Torah, the Bible that is miraculous, Rashi just says it happened. Maimonides will say, well, you know, that's the way it appeared. You know, that's the way that God makes things appear to people. You know, that maybe it's not exactly. So, you know, that's Maimonides didn't want there to be a system where God suspends the natural order. Anyways, and he's not the first rabbi to do that. You know, not first Jewish teacher who did that. Philo did that 2,000 years ago in Alexandria. Philo is a Greek speaking Jew, a Jew who lived in a Greek rational world of much closer to Aristotle and Plato, still a couple hundred years after them, but 300 years after them. But he also wanted to make Judaism a rational religion that Greek rational thinkers could wrap their heads around. So he also tried to. Philo, no. So yeah. Anyway, so Jews have been working at that for a long time, and again, there's some rabbis who follow that tradition, and then there's others who, you know, to get to Gail's point, there's people who try to uh, be more mystical about it and not to reject it or not to say, hey, you know, but like what's God capable of doing? Well, if it doesn't seem like God's capable of doing this now, then maybe it's because God doesn't need to do it now. Maybe it's because we're not making it happen now. You know, we need to bring God out back into the world so that these things can happen now. Yeah, there's different approaches to it in Jewish mysticism and in other Jewish thought. So all these things are constantly going on, and they're going on now. And it goes on now within the Jewish community today. Though I would say that most of us try to be somewhat rational in our approach to religion, which is that we don't have to be Greek philosophers to say, I want my religion to follow science and to follow the things that we know that are established facts. Me again, I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent, but the reality is most of us want a religion that can also take into consideration evolution and science and everything else. So, uh, yeah, that's kind of where we're at now, which I think at the end of the day is really the question, right? Where are we now with this? So let's take a look at Bildad, the second friend, friend number two, who's going to now continue challenging him. So again, we already said we met the first friend. He spoke, and then Job responded, just so you know. And that was about a 2-chapter response that Job replied. So chapter 6 and chapter 7 are Job's reply to Eliphaz. Now this is Bildad. So without kind of giving away what's going to happen, Bildad will speak, and then Job will respond. So let's start, if you will, Rosemary.
Just before we get started,
Yeah.
I would like to dedicate my reading today to the memory of David Watson, whose birthday was today.
I was going to say it was either today or yesterday. So thank you. Thanks,
11th.
Rosemary, for helping us remember David today. Yeah, absolutely. So let us dedicate Job today to him. All right.
Bildad the Shuhite said in reply, "How long will you speak such things? Your utterances are a mighty wind. Will God pervert the right? Will the Almighty pervert justice? If your sons sinned against him, he dispatched them for their transgression. But if you seek God and supplicate the Almighty, if you are blameless and upright, he will protect you and grant well-being to your righteous home."
And I just want to point out there. So Bildad just pulled out the big card to some extent, which is your sons. And again, remember the story, the setup. His sons died, right? Job's sons and daughters died. And here Bildad says they deserved it. They deserved it. They did something to deserve punishment. That's it. That's it. And you didn't, which is why you're still alive. But you better figure out what you're treading real not really good here, Job, because you're saying you didn't deserve it, and maybe you didn't deserve it, but by saying that, you're calling into question God's system, and you will deserve it. So that's what he just said. He basically just said your sons died because they did something that they deserve to die. That's what happens. It's God's system. Okay, he killed them for their transgression. Yep.
Though your beginning be small, in the end you will grow very great. Ask the generation past. Study what their fathers have searched out. For we are of yesterday and know nothing. Our days on earth are a shadow. Surely they will teach you and tell you, speaking out of their understanding. Can papyrus thrive without marsh? Can rushes grow without water? While still tender, not yet plucked, they would wither before any other grass. Such is the fate of all who forget God. The hope of the impious man comes to naught, whose confidence is a thread of gossamer, whose trust is a spider's web. He leans on his house, it will not stand. He seizes hold of it, but it will not hold. He stays fresh even in the sun. His shoots spring up in his garden. His roots are twined around a heap. They take hold of a house of stones. When he is uprooted from his place, it denies him, saying, "I never saw you." Such is his happy lot, and from the earth others will grow. Surely God does not despise the blameless. He gives no support to evildoers. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy. Your enemies will be clothed in disgrace. The tent of the wicked will vanish.
And that is Bildad's challenge. A lot of what we've already heard from the first friend, Eliphaz, similar ideas. God gives back what you deserve. You get what you deserve, right? And again, beautiful lines. Beautiful lines. Trust in God. You know, beautiful lines. Again, ironically, we can't quote any of these because they're essentially garbage, because his friend is wrong. Job has done nothing wrong. So again, beautiful lines, right? Look at look at the system. The system's worked for a long time. God protects those who are good, etc. Anybody else want to comment on any of these? This this Bildad's 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 words to Job. Not exactly comforting, but look, you're getting what you deserve. So here's what Job says.
Job said in reply, "Indeed, I know that it is so. Man cannot win a suit against God. If he insisted on a trial with him, he would not answer one charge in 1,000. Wise of heart and mighty in power, whoever challenged him and came out whole? Him who moves the mountains without their knowing it, who overturns them in his anger, who shakes the earth from its place till its pillars quake, who commands the sun not to shine, who seals up the stars, who by himself spread out the heavens and trod on the back of the sea, who made the bear and Orion, Pleiades, and the chambers of the south wind, who performs great deeds which cannot be fathomed, and wondrous things without number."
And again, Job is basically saying, look at all the amazing things that God has created in our world, in our universe, in our cosmos. Okay? Interesting what he calls out, by the way. In addition to the things that we have on the earth, which we've kind of talked about, the waters and the stuff on the earth, the stars, right? So look at this, right? We put the bear, right, which we assume is, right? We assume that is the Big Dipper, right? Ursa Major. We assume Orion here, the big stars that we see up in the winter sky, you can still see it right now, and the south wind, right, which is considered, to some extent, again, they had the different winds, the north, south, east, and west winds. The southern wind, to some extent, seems the most, well, if you're living in this part of the world, would be considered like one of the most distant winds, one of the most exotic winds, if you will. So, yeah, look at these amazing things that God has created, right? And so Job is calling forth all of these things. But again, I always love when we see mentions of the constellations, or at least what constellations they looked at and kind of the ones that came to their minds. And that is, again, we assume that you're talking about the, I don't know if anyone else has, does there a different translation you have, Mary? Arcturus, yeah, Arcturus. Yeah, that might be a translation. That's the King James. I don't know if anybody else has anything else. Chima is the Pleiades, the sisters, right? Which are also very visible in the night sky. That's in there, right? Pleiades, right? Yeah, that was one of the star systems that people would look at and kind of use as, the base, all around the world. Told you that's what Subaru means. Subaru are the Pleiades, the sisters. It's on the logo for the car. You'll see the stars on the front, because in Japan it was considered to be a good star system to use to navigate by. So Pleiades. Anyways, it's one of the few Bible-based references. It's not the only one. We talked about him. The prophet Amos talks about people worshiping these things, by the way. So they were already being worshipped, at least, in the Middle East. All right, let's keep going.
"He passes me by, I do not see him. He goes by me, but I do not perceive him. He snatches away. Who can stop him? Who can say to him, 'What are you doing?' God does not restrain his anger. Under him, Rahab's helpers sink down." How then can I answer him or choose my arguments against him?
Yeah. They don't they don't translate Rahav's helpers, right? Yeah. Rahav is a monster. Like we already read, right? It talked about the Leviathan. They've been mentioned. As I mentioned last week, there are several mystical beasts that are mentioned here, primeval beasts, beasts that are seen as playthings to God, as you will see actually stated. Yeah. So God is so big that the monsters that other people look at as gods, and again, Ozri Rahav are Rahav's helpers. So that means that Rahav was so big that he had helpers. That's what the word Ozri means. That's why it's not a really good translation for it, but what's King James say? Helpers? Proud helpers, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's again saying that God is so much bigger than all the mystical beasts, monsters that, other people worship. Yeah. So again, just pointing out constellations, these kinds of references to mythical beasts, to constellations, to which again people worshipped, are just references to some extent for the people who are reading Job, who understand Job in its original context. Look at how big God is, that these things are nothing to God. These are little tiny playthings to God. So the other people's religious icons and deities are nothing to God. Yeah.
Though I were in the right, I could not speak out, but I would plead for mercy with my judge. If I summoned him and he responded, I do not believe he would lend me his ear, for he crushes me for a hair. He wounds me much for no cause. He does not let me catch my breath, but sates me with bitterness. If a trial of strength, he is the strong one. If a trial in court, who will summon him for me? Though I were innocent, my mouth would condemn me. Though I were blameless, he would prove me crooked. I am blameless. I'm distraught. I am sick of life. It is all one. Therefore, I say, he destroys the blameless and the guilty.
So Job just asserted to his friend Bildad, and again, assumingly the other people, the other friends are listening. I am blameless, right? Right? I am blameless. He says it a couple of times there, actually three times by the time he says he destroys the blameless. He has just asserted, Job has just asserted that God destroys the blameless and the guilty because I'm blameless and he's destroying me. So look, he says, I can't challenge God. He already said that. I can't subpoena God. I can't summon God. I can't bring God to court. I can't put God on trial. But God seems to be destroying everything, everybody. There doesn't seem to be any sense here with regards to what's happening to me. I am proof that God destroys the blameless and the guilty together. So, what Job is at least willing to acknowledge here, that if he's not blameless, he's really close to being blameless, because he says, God would punish me for a hair, for something like, it can't be perfect, but it doesn't seem like there's any sense to the way I'm being, to the punishment. So again, now there's a question of whether Job, by saying what he is saying, is earning his punishment. That's the interesting thing here, right? Is he now showing that he deserves to be punished by what he's saying? Because that's kind of what his friends are saying. His friends are saying, Job, you're proving you're wrong right now by talking this way. But Job's like, yeah, but I'm only talking this way because God's clearly punishing me. So this is kind of where we're at. There's an admission that, yeah, I what am I going to do? I can't challenge God. So that's what he just says. I say he destroys the blameless and the guilty. line right there perhaps summarizes this whole challenge better than anything else. That line is what essentially the book of Job is about. Does God destroy the blameless and the guilty together? So that's the line, if you will.
When suddenly a scourge brings death, he mocks as the innocent fail. The earth is handed over to the wicked one. He covers the eyes of its judges. If it is not he, then who? My days fly swifter than a runner. They flee without seeing happiness. They pass like reed boats, like an eagle swooping onto its prey. If I say, I will forget my complaint, abandon my sorrow, and be diverted, I remain in dread of all my suffering. I know that you will not acquit me. It will be I who am in the wrong. Why then should I waste effort? If I washed with soap, cleansed my hands with lye, you would dip me in muck till my clothes would abhor me. He is not a man like me that I can answer him, that we can go to law together. No arbiter is between us to lay his hand on us both. If he would only take his rod away from me and not let his terror frighten me, then I would speak out without fear of him, for I know myself not to be so.
Yeah, this response is not over. So the break here is somewhat artificial or based on the fact there's been 35 verses, but Job is still talking.
I am disgusted with life. I will give rein to my complaint. Speak in the bitterness of my soul. Oh, sorry. I say to God, do not condemn me. Let me know what you charge me with. Does it benefit you to defraud, to despise the toil of your hands while smiling on the counsel of the wicked? Do you have eyes of flesh? Is your vision that of mere men? Are your days the days of a mortal? Are your years the years of a man, that you seek my iniquity and search out my sin? You know that I am not guilty, and that there is none to deliver from your hand. Your hands shaped and fashioned me, then destroyed every part of me. Consider that you fashioned me like clay. Will you then turn me back into dust? You poured me out like milk, congealed me like cheese. You clothed me with skin and flesh, and wove me of bones and sinews. You bestowed on me life and care. Your providence watched over my spirit. Yet these things you hid in your heart. I know that you had this in mind, to watch me when I sinned and not clear me of my iniquity. Should I be guilty, the worse for me. And even when innocent, I cannot lift my head. So sated am I with the shame and drenched in my misery. Is it something to be proud of to hunt me like a lion, to show yourself wondrous through me time and again? You keep sending fresh witnesses against me, letting your vexation with me grow. I serve my term and am my own replacement. Why did you let me come out of the womb? Better had I expired before any eyes saw me. Had I been as though I never was, had I been carried from the womb to the grave. My days are few, so desist. Leave me alone. Let me be diverted for a while before I depart, never to return, for the land of deepest gloom, a land whose light is darkness, all gloom and disarray, whose light is like darkness.
And that is Job's response to Bildad. Again, similar to what he said to his first friend, but a little different and um, a little bit more reinforced with this idea that I can't make a claim against God. So, what good is it? I can't challenge God. So, there is this kind of feeling of that he has not only of his own pain, his own suffering, his own feelings of um, not being able to understand why this is happening or feeling that it's just. And then there's this added feeling that we see really in this second scene which is, and what am I going to do about it? What can I do about it? I can't lay a challenge against God. And so this is, again, look, Job is, by biblical standards, a fairly long work, right? It's not short. And so you wonder, like, what's the purpose of, all these chapters? And there's about 30 chapters of this dialogue, monologues and dialogues and responses, speeches. And and again, what's interesting about it, and I think what's so powerful about it, and why people have been captivated by it for thousands of years, is that you have to write it in a way that the dialogue, well, obviously it's poetic, it's also very powerful, but you can't just, it's like when someone writes any kind of play or any kind of scene, as much as you have powerful lines in there, you don't remember every line necessarily of a great monologue or a great speech. When you think about the great speeches that Shakespeare gives, or, even in modern writing, when you see, a movie like, when you have something like, I just heard somebody picking through the famous "You Can't Handle the Truth," right? The Few Good Men, which was written by what's his name, the guy from West Wing, that dude.
Aaron Sorkin.
Yeah, Sorkin. So even Sorkin, who has lots of really good lines packed into short, he tries to get them out there. Or David Mamet, some of the great, who, by the way, why are all these people Jewish? Think about it. You have to write stuff around it. You can't just, there has to be some life behind it. There has to be some poetry behind it as well, to lay down these lines. But they're very powerful, and again, they build on each other. So the scene has to some extent build on itself. I don't know. There's really, there really is some beauty to this, that you realize as you read it. You can't just read a synopsis of it.
Mhm.
You can, but it's not going to give you any part of the the way that this comes to life. All right. Any comments? Any questions? The Bildad dialogue, if you will? The last few chapters were those. And now we come to the third friend. So far. We got this so far. We got so far. No, it's so far. We got so far to.
So we're so far with so far.
This is it. But we have now the third friend.
What he's
Now,
going to call his podcast.
What? So far?
So far with so far.
With so far? Yeah. Well, you can imagine his friends, he's not been happy with his friends so far. So let's see what this guy's going to say. Because a lot of times in a setup, right? In a setup, like the first two are wrong, and then the last, it's like the first two brothers screw up, but the last brother makes it, right? The fairy tale. Let's see if that's the mode, the rule of three. But see if this works. See if so far has anything you can get in there that different than the first two. Here we go.
Then Zophar, the Naamathite, said in reply, "Is a multitude of words unanswerable? Must a loquacious person be right? Your prattle may silence men. You may mock without being rebuked, and say, my doctrine is pure, and I have been innocent in your sight. But would that God might speak and talk to you himself. He would tell you the secrets of wisdom, for there are many sides to sagacity, and know that God has overlooked for you some of your iniquity. Would you discover the mystery of God? Would you discover the limit of the Almighty? Higher than heaven? What can you do? Deeper than Sheol? What can you know?"
And that's a beautiful line. Like that line, it's a great line. You never hear it because so far said it. Well, it's a beautiful line. Higher than heaven, what can you do? Deeper than the deepest parts of the netherworld. What can you know? Right? It's a beautiful line. Anyways.
Its measure is longer than the earth and broader than the sea. Should he pass by or confine or call an assembly, who can stop him? For he knows deceitful men. When he sees iniquity, does he not discern it? A hollow man will get understanding when a wild ass is born a man. But if you direct your mind and spread forth your hands toward him, if there is iniquity with you, remove it, and do not let injustice reside in your tent. Then, free of blemish, you will hold your head high, and when in straits, be unafraid. You will then put your misery out of mind. Consider it as water that has flowed past. Life will be brighter than noon. You will shine. You will be like the morning. You will be secure, for there is hope, and entrenched, you will rest secure. You will lie down undisturbed. The great will court your favor. But the eyes of the wicked pine away. Escape is cut off from them. They have only their last breath to look forward to.
That is, again, very similar to what the previous friends have said, which is you've done bad, and, you need to get yourself right with God. You must have done something. You just don't know what it is. God knows what it is. God knows everything. You don't know what it is, and that's why you're suffering. But just admit you must have suffered. You must have done something right to deserve the suffering. Again, we know Job didn't. Friends don't know that. Job knows it because he knows himself. But, does he really know it? Like, is there a part of him that's questioning that? Because that's what, like, most of us would deal with. As we started suffering disproportionately to how we think we should be suffering, we would say, well, maybe I just don't, maybe I did do something that bad. Maybe I just don't understand the consequences of what I did. So, this is natural stuff. So, yeah, that's Sophar's monologue, or, speech, if you will. And now here's Job's reply.
Then Job said in reply, "Indeed, you are the voice of the people, and wisdom will die with you. But I, like you, have a mind, and am not less than you. Who does not know such things? I have become a laughing stock to my friend, one who calls to God and is answered, blamelessly innocent, a laughing stock. In the thought of the complacent, there is contempt for calamity. It is ready for those whose foot slips. Robbers live untroubled in their tents, and those who provoke God are secure, those whom God's hands have produced. But ask the beasts, and they will teach you. The birds of the sky, they will tell you. Or speak to the earth, it will teach you. The fish of the sea, they will inform you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In his hand is every living soul, and the breath of all mankind.
Isn't that a beautiful line? Asher beyado nefesh kol chai, right? Ruach kol basarish. In his God's hand is every living soul and the breath of all mankind. Beautiful. But look what he's saying.
Truly, the ear tests arguments as the palate tastes foods. Is wisdom in the aged and understanding in the long-lived? With him are wisdom and courage. His are counsel and understanding. Whatever he tears down cannot be rebuilt. Whomever he imprisons cannot be set free. When he holds back the waters, they dry up. When he lets them loose, they tear up the land. With him are strength and resourcefulness. Erring and causing to err are from him. He makes counselors go about naked and causes judges to go mad. He undoes the belts of kings and fastens loincloths on them. He makes priests go about naked and leads temple servants astray. He deprives trusty men of speech and takes away the reason of elders. He pours disgrace upon great men and loosens the belt of the mighty. He draws mysteries out of the darkness and brings obscurities to light. He exalts nations, then destroys them. He expands nations, then leads them away. He deranges the leaders of the people and makes them wander in a trackless waste. They grope without light in the darkness. He makes them wander as if drunk.
And that's not the end of his response. It continues.
My eye has seen all this. My ear has heard and understood it. What you know, I know also. I'm not less than you. Indeed, I would speak to the Almighty. I insist on arguing with God. But you invent lies. All of you are quacks. If only you would keep quiet, it would be considered wisdom on your part. Hear now my arguments. Listen to my pleading. Will you speak unjustly on God's behalf? Will you speak deceitfully for him? Will you be partial toward him? Will you plead God's cause? Will it go well when he examines you? Will you fool him as one fools men? He will surely reprove you if in your heart you are partial toward him. His threat will terrify you, and his fear will seize you. Your briefs are empty platitudes. Your responses are unsubstantial. Keep quiet. I will have my say come what may upon me. How? I will take my flesh in my teeth. I will take my life in my hands. He may well slay me. I may have no hope. Yet I will argue my case before him. In this too is my salvation, that no impious man can come into his presence. Listen closely to my words. Give ear to my discourse. See now, I have prepared a case. I know that I will win it. For who is it that would challenge me? I should then keep silent and expire. But two things do not do to me, so that I need not hide from you. Remove your hand from me, and let not your terror frighten me. Then summon me, and I will respond, or I will speak, and you reply to me. How many are my iniquities and sins? Advise me of my transgression and sin. Why do you hide your face and treat me like an enemy? Will you harass a driven leaf? Will you pursue dried up straw, that you decree for me bitter things? Make me answer for the iniquities of my youth? That you put my feet in the stocks and watch all my ways, hemming in my footsteps? Man wastes away like a rotten thing, like a garment eaten by moths.
He's still responding, Job. This is all part of his response. And again, his response is going to continue. He, first of all, says flat out, look, you can say what you want about what's happening to me, whether I'm really guilty and I'm not going to admit it. I'm going to prove to you that I'm not. So God, let me just, and you notice how he's not really talking to, so far, he's talking to God. You see it. I mean, they recognize that by putting the you in capital. He's not talking to him, not talking to so far or any of the friends. He's talking to God. So first of all, he says, look, I know that there are wicked people that are running around out there that aren't being punished. Why are you picking on me, God? And he says to him, God, first of all, you got to stop me. You got to stop the suffering. Let me now ask you a question, God. Why is this happening to me? Right? Why is this happening? God, you tell me why this is happening. What did I do? I want an answer. And he says to the friends, he says, you guys are misrepresenting yourself, and God's not going to be happy. The fact that you're saying that I deserve this and that there is a system to it is a lie, because God knows there's no reason for this. And so what you're doing is wrong. By saying that I did wrong and by saying that I'm getting what I deserved, you are not being honest, and God's going to hold you accountable for it. That's what he said to him, flat out. God doesn't like liars, and you're lying. So then he again turns to God and says, God, let me have an answer. You tell me what I did to deserve this. So he's now actually come out now and said flat out to God, I want an answer. I deserve an answer. Right? That's what he said. We might now be getting to the crux of just, I mean, hold on to that. I mean, just hold that, hold that, hold that question, right? Hold that question that Job just laid, right? How many are my iniquities and sin? Advise me of my transgression and sin. Why do you hide your face and treat me like an enemy? These are questions to God, right? This is the question that he's asking God. Why are you doing this to me? Okay. That's what he said. So he's asked it. He's asked God for an answer. Again, because every human being wants to know that at one time or another, we've wanted to ask God that. We've asked God that question. We've wanted the answer. Why are these things happening to me? Why? And again, it comes from the point in time where we're actually suffering with something. Why is this happening to me? What did I do to deserve this? That's what he says. I want an answer, God. Now, it continues. This is all still Job talking to God, really, not to, sometimes he seems to be talking to his friends, and sometimes he's talking to God, and sometimes he seems to be talking to himself, or to us. He's always talking to us. Here he goes.
Man born of woman is short-lived and sated with trouble. He blossoms like a flower and withers. He vanishes like a shadow and does not endure. Do you fix your gaze on such a one? Will you go to law with me? Who can produce a clean thing out of an unclean one? No one. His days are determined. You know the number of his months. You have set him limits that he cannot pass. Turn away from him, that he may be at ease until, like a hireling, he finishes out his day. There is hope for a tree. If it is cut down, it will renew itself. Its shoots will not cease. If its roots are old in the earth and its stump dies in the ground, at the scent of water it will bud and produce branches like a sapling. But mortals languish and die. Man expires. Where is he? The waters of the sea fail, and the river dries up and is parched. So man lies down, never to rise. He will awake only when the heavens are no more, only then be aroused from his sleep. Oh, that you would hide me in Sheol, conceal me until your anger passes. Set me a fixed time to attend to me.
By the way, this line, man lies down never to rise. He will awake only when the heavens are no more, only then to be aroused from sleep. It seems as though, again, there is some time that we come back to life, but only when the world around us, and again, the heavens here don't seem to be the heaven where people go to when they die, but literally the heavens of the sky above us. When the system, the cosmos that we have no longer exists, then we will come back. It's a very interesting idea because, again, to some extent, this is kind of what some of what's come into Christian theology of, especially, Seventh-day Adventists believe that when we die, we go to sleep and we'll be resurrected only when the end of the world happens. And so no one is in heaven right now. There's just sleeping souls, and they get resurrected when it all. So I mean, Seventh-day Adventists would look at this as a proof of their, as kind of one of the more important proof texts of their theology, especially their belief of life after death. But the answer, within Judaism was that there is a time when our bodies will be resurrected, but in the meantime, the body might be sleeping, but our souls are with God. So, this is, there is a time when there will be a full, well, let's put it this way. That's what started to come out during the times, just before Jesus, where people start talking about resurrection of a body. As I mentioned before, the Sadducees never believed in a physical resurrection of a body. They didn't believe that. They said it's not in the Torah, so don't go around telling people that, because there's no proof of it. And you can't necessarily prove something from the book of Job, which is poetry. But there does seem to be this understanding that when we die, part of us is asleep, maybe, or part of us, kind of is not with God, if you will, and part of it eventually will come back to life. Again, it's difficult to generate beliefs of the afterlife from the book of Job, but there does.
Saul brings back the witch of Endor.
I know, and so he seems to be disturbed. He was sleeping, and he seems to be disturbed. There is an understanding too that, like, if we're in
But his
Sheol,
body doesn't come back even
correct, but the spirit, perhaps his spirit, even Saul, because when Saul calls him up, Samuel had just died. Samuel hadn't died that long ago. So if you want to know what the rabbinic teaching is of that, how to explain that, is that Samuel hadn't ascended to heaven yet. He was still, his soul was still on earth, if you will, was still in the transition stage. It hadn't been elevated yet, so it could be brought back. That's what the answer would be, because even Samuel, who was a great prophet, a great leader, a judge, not a king, but he's the king maker. By the way, there's a new House of David, that's out on Netflix, I think. I watched like 2 minutes of it. But yeah, check it out. I don't know if anyone's seen it yet.
I've seen it.
You have? Did you like it?
Yeah, I liked it. I did. It was interesting to see. It's like Rome. No, well, it's a lot of mishigas around it, but it still
does it take some of the Bible that people haven't seen before? Because remember, they have to excise a lot of the biblical story because it's too troubling for people. So I don't know if they got to the dirtier parts of it, if you will.
I don't think so. Okay. But it is interesting to see the costume and the dress and how they lived, and like watching Rome. That's interesting.
Yeah, it seemed like they tried to go realistic with it. So, anyways, yeah. So if Samuel had just died, then when Saul called him up, then he was kind of in between and was in the purgatory type time, if you will, which even Samuel had to go through, which is, teaching from that. But anyways, Job it's a poetic reflection on what happens when we go. But again, this is human to some extent. The human limitation is being that, right?
If a man dies, can he live again? All the time of my service, I wait until my replacement comes. You would call, and I would answer you. You would set your heart on your handiwork.
Yeah, and again, what does that mean? Until my replacement comes. Replacement for what? Right? If a man dies, can he live again? I mean, that kind of says you don't live. But look, the way that it's been understood in traditional, like, nothing here is against, nothing here challenges traditional Jewish beliefs of the afterlife. He's basically saying you get one turn here. You get one turn. You don't get to come back to do the same thing. And, when I'm done, somebody else will be here, and I don't have, it's not going to be me. Somebody else will be here. So I got one chance. I got one chance to do my life. It's not, again, against traditional Jewish thought. Even if you believe in reincarnation, even if you believe in life after death, even if you believe in a soul, all that's true. But you get one chance to live this life that you have. Okay?
Then you would not count my steps or keep watch over my sin. My transgression would be sealed up in a pouch. You would coat over my iniquity. Mountains collapse and crumble. Rocks are dislodged from their place. Water wears away stone. Torrents wash away earth. So you destroy man's hope. You overpower him forever, and he perishes. You alter his visage and dispatch him. His sons attain honor, and he does not know it. They are humbled, and he is not aware of it. He feels only the pain of his flesh, and his spirit mourns in him.
Yeah, and that seems to indicate again, what's the King James translation of the last line of 22, Mary? Yeah. So, yeah, it doesn't seem like a good lot for human beings. Yeah, again, it could be understood that the spirit continues on after the body is no longer there, but it also could be it's spirit crushing to live in a body that's falling apart. Another possibility. Tough. It's tough, right? Uh, so that is Job's. Those lines are Job's. Those chapters are Job's responses to Not So Far, and to some extent to the rest of the friends, because they all build his his last speech built on the ones that came before. I mean, it's not like, and let me start over again. He adds to the stuff, and he sometimes repeats certain things, but again, he's building on his previous speeches. Now, we got a second round of speeches. This is Eliphaz now coming back. And it goes in order. It goes Eliphaz, Bildad, and so far. And now we have Eliphaz for round two. Again, in the rebuttal, if you will.
Eliphaz the Temanite said in reply, "Does a wise man answer with windy opinions and fill his belly with the east wind? Should he argue with useless talk, with words that are of no worth? You subvert piety and restrain prayer to God. Your sinfulness dictates your speech, so you choose crafty language. Your own mouth condemns you, not I. Your lips testify against you. Were you the first man born? Were you created before the hills? Have you listened in on the counsel of God? Have you sole possession of wisdom? What do you know that we do not know, or understand that we do not? Among us are gray-haired old men, older by far than your father. Are God's consolations not enough for you, and his gentle words to you? How your heart has carried you away, how your eyes have failed you, that you could vent your anger on God and let such words out of your mouth. What is man that he can be cleared of guilt, one born of woman that he be in the right? He puts no trust in his holy ones. The heavens are not guiltless in his sight. What then of one loathsome and foul, man, who drinks wrongdoing like water? Fourth, listen to me. What I have seen, I will declare. That which wise men have transmitted from their fathers and have not withheld, to whom alone the land was given, no stranger passing among them. The wicked man writhes in torment all his days. Few years are reserved for the ruthless. Frightening sounds fill his ears. When he is at ease, a robber falls upon him. He is never sure he will come back from the dark. A sword stares him in the face. He wanders about for bread. Where is it? He knows that the day of darkness has been readied for him. Troubles terrify him. Anxiety overpowers him, like a king expecting a siege, for he has raised his arm against God and played the hero against the Almighty. He runs at him defiantly with his thickly bossed shield. His face is covered with fat and his loins with blubber. He dwells in cities doomed to ruin, in houses that shall not be lived in, that are destined to become heaps of rubble. He will not be rich. His wealth will not endure. His produce shall not bend to the earth. He will never get away from the darkness. Flames will shear his shoots. He will pass away by the breath of his mouth. He will not be trusted. He will be misled by falsehood, and falsehood will be his recompense. He will wither before his time, his boughs never having flourished. He will drop his unripe grapes like a vine. He will shed his blossoms like an olive tree. For the company of the impious is desolate. Fire consumes the tents of the briber, for they have conceived mischief, given birth to evil, and their womb has produced deceit.
So nothing in that whole speech from Eliphaz is considered to be not traditional theology. There's nothing in what he just said that was wrong from the standpoint of, we've heard it before. We've heard it especially in Psalms, especially in Proverbs, especially in the wisdom literature that we've read so far. Again, it's not focusing on sacrifices and on religious obligations. It's talking about, what good people do and what bad people do and how the punishment comes to those people who are bad. And God will punish those who are bad. Nothing that he has said is wrong from the standpoint of traditional theology. Nothing. Again, it's all good stuff. It's all good. I mean, it's all true. It's all valid. It's beautiful. Again, we can't use any of it because it's not true. That's the crazy thing. Everything that he just said does not apply to Job. And Job's going to tell you.
And Job said in reply, I have often heard such things. You are all mischievous comforters. Have windy words no limit? What afflicts you that you speak on? I would also talk like you if you were in my place. I would barrage you with words. I would wag my head over you. I would encourage you with words. My moving lips would bring relief. If I speak, my pain will not be relieved. And if I do not, what have I lost? Now he has truly worn me out. You have destroyed my whole community. You have shriveled me. My gauntness serves as a witness and testifies against me. In his anger, he tears and persecutes me. He gnashes his teeth at me. My foe stabs me with his eyes. They open wide their mouths at me. Reviling me, they strike my cheeks. They inflame themselves against me. God hands me over to an evil man, thrusts me into the clutches of the wicked. I have been untroubled, and he broke me in pieces. He took me by the scruff and shattered me. He set me up as his target. His bowmen surrounded me. He pierced my kidneys. He showed no mercy. He spilled my bile onto the ground. He breached me, breach after breach. He rushed at me like a warrior. I sewed sackcloth over my skin. I buried my glory in the dust. My face is red with weeping. Darkness covers my eyes. For no injustice on my part and for the purity of my prayer. Earth, do not cover my blood. Let there be no resting place for my outcry. Surely now my witness is in heaven. He who can testify for me is on high. Oh, my advocates, my fellows, before God my eyes shed tears. Let him arbitrate between a man and God, as between a man and his fellow. For a few more years will pass, and I shall go the way of no return.
Yeah, Job is basically saying, I'm done, right? God's done all this to me. And to some extent, he's holding God responsible for these stupid people that are coming and telling him that he's done something wrong to deserve this. And so this is part of his suffering. He's physically suffering, and then he's emotionally and mentally suffering because these people are coming and telling him he did something wrong. He knows it. He's not done midway through his speech.
My spirit is crushed. My days run out. The graveyard waits for me. Surely mocking men keep me company, and with their provocations I close my eyes. Come now, stand surety for me. Who will give his hand on my behalf? You have hidden understanding from their minds. Therefore, you must not exalt them. He informs on his friends for a share of their property, and his children's eyes pine away. He made me a byword among people. I have become like Tophet of old.
And by the way,
Eyes
Tophet of
failed
old,
from
1
vexation.
second. Tophet is the place where children were burned, right? Not a good place. This is a reference to, um, yeah, child sacrifice.
My eyes fail from vexation. All shapes seem to me like shadows. The upright are amazed at this. The pure are aroused against the impious. The righteous man holds to his way. He whose hands are clean grows stronger. But all of you, come back now. I shall not find a wise man among you. My days are done, my tendons severed, the strings of my heart. They say that night is day, that light is here in the face of darkness. If I must look forward to Sheol as my home and make my bed in the dark place, say to the pit, you are my father, to the maggots, mother, sister. Where then is my hope? Who can see hope for me? Will it descend to Sheol? Shall we go down together to the dust?
Yeah. And again, in a very poetic way that he finishes, which is, if I'm going to die, if that's where and again, he doesn't just say, I'm going to die. He says, if I go down to Sheol, make my bed in that dark place, where the pit, where death, my father, maggots, or mother. And so, I mean, what a powerful visual, that powerful, poetic. I mean, to talk about death in this way. And then it's not just his physical body that's dying. My hope. Where's my tikva? Where's my tikva? Is my tikva, my hope, going down with me? Because if my body dies right now, if I die, so does my hope for the fact that this system works. I die, okay? I die. I get it. But then if I die right now, none of this makes any sense. And so my hope, my belief in a world that makes sense dies too. He said, look, you guys don't understand. You guys don't get it. If it was just my death, okay, it's bad. It's sad. I mean, I still don't understand it, but I don't understand it. And that is what's really, 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 again, what Job is saying. I don't understand it. And that is worse to some extent than the death, the suffering that I'm going through, the inevitable death. Now, a second friend comes forward. Bildad comes up again too.
Then Bildad the Shuhite said in reply, how long? Put an end to talk. Consider, and then we shall speak. Why are we thought of as brutes, regarded by you as stupid? You who tear yourself to pieces in anger, will earth's order be disrupted for your sake? Will rocks be dislodged from their place? Indeed, the light of the wicked fails. The flame of his fire does not shine. The light in his tent darkens, his lamp fails him. His iniquitous strides are hobbled, his schemes overthrow him. He is led by his feet into the net. He walks onto the toils. The trap seizes his heel, the noose tightens on him. The rope for him lies hidden on the ground, his snare on the path. Terrors assault him from all sides and send his feet flying. His progeny hunger. Disaster awaits his wife. The tendons under his skin are consumed. Death's firstborn consumes his tendons. He is torn from the safety of his tent. Terror marches him to the king. It lodges in his desolate tent. Sulfur is strewn upon his home. His roots below dry up, and above his branches wither. All mention of him vanishes from the earth. He has no name abroad. He is thrust from light to darkness, driven from the world. He has no seed or breed among his people, no survivor where he once lived. Generations to come will be appalled at his fate, as the previous ones are seized with horror. These were the haunts of the wicked. Here was the place of him who knew not God.
Again, nothing he says, nothing that guy just told you is not traditional theology.
Mm-hmm.
Everything he just said is totally legitimate. And again, it's said beautifully, it's said powerfully, it's said just as beautiful as the Psalms. And none of it we ever hear. One of the reasons why we're reading through this faster is because none of these quotes exist in our liturgy. None of these quotes, none of these lines are ever quoted. They're never used because, again, they're put in the mouth of somebody who's wrong. And so it's difficult to take it out of context. I mean, you can. There's definitely examples of lines that are taken out of context. But it's almost as if our tradition said, we got to be really careful with this. Because if somebody knows where this comes from and says, wait, that's from Job's friend who was an idiot. Why are you quoting an idiot? So it almost marks everything off as like you got to put a black line through that. Can't use it. It's done. So that's one of the reasons why we're going through this fast, because there's not that much. And plus, it really has to be read as one unit. I mean, I would love to have been able to read Job in one sitting, but it can't. But it's also poetry, right? And so poetry is read differently than a story. This is not a story where we can talk about, why is this, where does this come from historically? Where is this, what's the context of this line? How does it refer back to other lines? I mean, again, these lines refer back to Psalms and to Proverbs and to other lines where, we can look at almost verbatim some of these words, but some of these structures. But yeah, it's a problem because we can't use it. I mean, we used it in Job, and once it's been used in Job, it's almost like, okay, and now what do you do? Again, there is one or two lines here. We said the very famous, God gives, God takes. Blessed be the name of God, right? We Job's initial line, I mean, people know it by heart, but very little in Job we can quote and say, yeah, isn't that in Job? So now Job responds to Bildad, to the second rebuttal. This is his rebuttal. Here you go.
Job said in reply, how long will you grieve my spirit and crush me with words? Time and again you humiliate me and are not ashamed to abuse me. If indeed I have erred, my error remains with me. Though you are overbearing toward me, reproaching me with my disgrace, yet know that God has wronged me. He has thrown up siege works around me. I cry violence, but am not answered. I shout, but get no justice.
Again, because you've seen it a lot.
Hamas.
What's the word?
Hamas.
Yeah, there it is right there. I cry Hamas. Hen atzek, I will cry, actually. It's the I will cry violence. Yep, there you go.
He has barred my way, I cannot pass. He has laid darkness upon my path. He has stripped me of my glory, removed the crown from my head. He tears down every part of me. I perish. He uproots my hope like a tree.
By the way, I just want to say, I just realized something. I just wonder if people have quoted this lately. I just wonder. I have to look it up now because I haven't looked it up, and it's only going to be in a Hebrew, something out of Israel that's in Hebrew. But if somebody has actually written a piece on this, I cry Hamas, but I'm not answered. I shout, but can get no justice. If anybody, especially, has felt in Israel that, I mean, maybe in the initial days when, people said, well, what's going to happen? How is Hamas going to be brought to justice? I wonder if anyone quoted this line and said, I cry Hamas, and where's my justice, right? Where's my answer? Which, again, one can make the argument, as long as Hamas still exists, is there any justice, right? As long as Hamas is allowed to operate in the open, right? As long as they're allowed to put, the hostages out on display and to do that kind of thing, is there justice, right? It's an interesting thing. I have to see. I have to do some searches to see if anybody has quoted this line in the last year and a half. Interesting. I'm going to look at that. I just stuck with me as saying, oh, it's actually kind of powerfully relevant, that line. Anyway, sorry. Let's continue. Sorry.
He kindles his anger against me. He regards me as one of his foes. His troops advance together. They build their road toward me and encamp around my tent. He alienated my kin from me. My acquaintances disown me. My relatives are gone. My friends have forgotten me. My dependents and maidservants regard me as a stranger. I am an outsider to them. I summon my servant, but he does not respond. I must myself entreat him. My odor is repulsive to my wife. I am loathsome to my children.
Now, here's an interesting question. His children aren't there anymore, right? We think, I mean, it seems as though his children were all dead. My odor is repulsive to my wife. I'm loathsome to my children. It's an interesting line, right? Is his children are, so maybe not all his children are gone, right? Maybe there's some young children still left behind in the house. Yeah. I just wonder how many times somebody quoted this back to their husband. My odor is repulsive to my wife. I wonder if that's been used before. Ruchi zara leishti, man. I wonder if anyone's ever quoted that before. I don't know. You shouldn't have to. It shouldn't happen, but maybe it's happened. Anyways, yeah. Here we go.
Even youngsters disdain me. When I rise, they speak against me. All my bosom friends detest me. Those I love have turned against me. My bones stick to my skin and flesh. I escape with the skin of my teeth. Pity me. Pity me. You are my friends, for the hand of God has struck me. Why do you pursue me like God, maligning me insatiably? Oh, that my words were written down. Would they were inscribed in a record, incised on a rock forever with iron, stylus, and lead. But I know that my vindicator lives. In the end, he will satisfy on earth. This, after my skin will have been peeled off. But I would behold God while still in my flesh. I myself, not another, would behold him, would see with my own eyes. My heart pines within me. You say, how do we persecute him? The root of the matter is in him. Be in fear of the sword, for your fury is iniquity worthy of the sword. No, there is a judgment.
So Job again attacks his friend and the rest of the other friends, saying, "You are not good friends. You are lying. I didn't do anything wrong, and I would like God to, answer to this." Again, similar ideas. But there are, again, as always, every chapter has something in here that, that we haven't necessarily seen before. It builds on the things that are there, which is, again, God is my vindicator. God is the one who can fix this. And I want to see God. I want to see God. I don't want to see God when I'm dead. I want to see God now. I want to see God as I'm living, as I'm suffering this, as I'm going through this. God, come here and, tell me, explain to me. And then again, I know that I haven't done anything wrong. So now is the third friend, Zophar.
Zophar, the Naamathite, said in reply, in truth, my thoughts urge me to answer. It is because of my feelings when I hear reproof that insults me. A spirit out of my understanding makes me reply. Do you not know this, that from time immemorial, since man was set on earth, the joy of the wicked has been brief, the happiness of the impious fleeting? Though he grows as high as the sky, his head reaching the clouds, he perishes forever, like his dung. Those who saw him will say, where is he? He flies away like a dream and cannot be found. He is vanished like a night vision. Eyes that glimpsed him do so no more. They cannot see him in his place any longer. His sons ingratiate themselves with the poor. His own hands must give back his wealth. His bones, still full of vigor, lie down in the dust with him. Though evil is sweet to his taste, and he conceals it under his tongue, though he saves it, does not let it go, holds it inside his mouth, his food in his bowels turns into asp's venom within him. The riches he swallows, he vomits. God empties it out of his stomach. He sucks the poison of asps. The tongue of the viper kills him. Let him not enjoy the streams, the rivers of honey, the brooks of cream. He will give back the goods unswallowed, the value of the riches undigested. Because he crushed and tortured the poor, he will not build up the house he took by force. He will not see his children tranquil. He will not preserve one of his dear ones. With no survivor to enjoy it, his fortune will not prosper. When he has all he wants, trouble will come. Misfortunes of all kinds will batter him. Let that fill his belly. Let him loose his burning anger at him and rain down his weapons upon him. Fleeing from iron arrows, he is shot through from a bow of bronze. Brandished and run through his body, the blade through his gall strikes terror into him. Utter darkness waits for his treasured ones. A fire fanned by no man will consume him. Who survives in his tent will be crushed. Heaven will expose his iniquity. Earth will rise up against him. His household will be cast forth by a flood, spilled out on the day of his wrath. This is the wicked man's portion from God, the lot God has ordained for him.
Yeah, again, nothing not part of that's, it's all part of Jewish tradition. It's all part of the things we've heard in Deuteronomy and Psalms, everywhere else. Bad stuff's going to happen to those who deserve it. God's going to get them.
Even
If
if
they've
they're
gotten away
doing
with
well
it,
now, it won't last.
It
Even
won't
if
get
they-
away with it.
And if it doesn't fall on them, it'll get their kids.
Yep. Just know God doesn't let these people get away with it. Which, by implication, means, Job, you deserve what you got.
Yeah.
And, you know, it kind of doesn't say, Job, you got what you got. You deserve what you got.
It
But
implies that.
it's pretty clear that he went through that. And again, nothing that he said is not part of what we've read up until now in the Bible. It's all legit. It's all legit. And that's the crazy thing, is that the writer of this took, the beautiful aspects of the texts we've read before and just played with them, used them. Job's response.
Job said in reply, listen well to what I say, and let that be your consolation. Bear with me while I speak, and after I have spoken, you may mock. Is my complaint directed toward a man? Why should I not lose my patience? Look at me and be appalled and clap your hand to your mouth. When I think of it, I am terrified. My body is seized with shuddering. Why do the wicked live on, prosper, and grow wealthy? Their children are with them always, and they see their children's children. Their homes are secure without fear. They do not feel the rod of God. Their bull breeds and does not fail. Their cow calves and never miscarries. They let their infants run loose like sheep, and their children skip about. They sing to the music of timbrel and lute, and revel to the tune of the pipe. They spend their days in happiness and go down to Sheol in peace. They say to God, leave us alone. We do not want to learn your ways. What is Shaddai that we should serve him? What will we gain by praying to him? Their happiness is not their own doing. The thoughts of the wicked are beyond me. How seldom does the lamp of the wicked fail? Does the calamity that they deserve befall them? Does he apportion their lot in anger? Let them become like straw in the wind, like chaff carried off by a storm. You say God is reserving his punishment for his sons. Let it be paid back to him, that he may feel it. Let his eyes see his ruin, and let him drink the wrath of Shaddai. For what does he care about the fate of his family when his number of months runs out? Can God be instructed in knowledge? He who judges from such heights? One man dies in robust health, all tranquil and untroubled. His pails are full of milk. The marrow of his bones is juicy. Another dies embittered, never having tasted happiness. They both lie in the dust and are covered with worms. Oh, I know your thoughts and the tactics you will devise against me. You will say, where is the house of the great man, and where is the tent in which the wicked dwelled? You must have consulted the wayfarers. You cannot deny their evidence. For the evil man is spared on the day of calamity, on the day when wrath is led forth. Who will upbraid him to his face? Who will requite him for what he has done? He is brought to the grave while a watch is kept at his tomb. The clods of the wadi are sweet to him. Everyone follows behind him. Innumerable are those who precede him. Why then do you offer me empty consolation? Of your replies, only the perfidy remains.
Yep. And so here we have Job's, and I don't know, Rosemary, if you realized when you said that if he doesn't get punished, his children get punished. Well, first of all, Job says he doesn't get punished. There's so many people out there that have been doing bad stuff that die happy deaths. They die happy men. They don't get punished. They're not, their death isn't horrible. They die, full and happy, and nothing bad ever happened to them. And even if that's the case, that system sucks. You punish their kids. You punish their kids, and you don't punish them. And so here we get to the crux of what Job is really doing that is different from the previous books. Because it doesn't just quote the books and say, well, this is our traditional theology. This is how we can make sense of it. They're actually putting it upside down. They're literally calling it into question and saying, is this really true? And also, if it is true, does that make sense? So we have this discussion in the Bible itself, which is it fair for the children of somebody who's bad to be punished for what their parent did? Okay, so we have that already in the prophets. We already read about it in the prophets. The prophets basically saying, yeah, that doesn't work. There's another issue which we already talked about, which is that Job has been written after the exile has already happened. This is Jews have returned. This is during the Persian period when the Jews have come back to the land of Israel. They've already lost their political power. They've gone through a collective punishment. And so now this question of individual suffering becomes something separate. Because you can say, hey, look, if we do stuff bad as a country, like in a nation, we were all bad, and God took away our nation. And he may not have taken it away from the people who really deserved it, because that's one of the things that the people we saw in Jeremiah. We saw it in the book of Kings to some extent. The people going, why are we getting the exile? What about all the other bad generations that came before it? And so the kind of the understanding in the Bible, and then definitely by the rabbis, it was cumulative. God keeps giving them chances, keeps hoping that they'll turn, and they don't. So eventually some children got punished for the deeds of their parents and grandparents. So the generation that suffered through the exile deserved it because their parents deserved it. It should have happened earlier. It just didn't happen. So eventually some innocent people died because of what their parents did. Okay, fine. That happened. Now what happens? Now what happens when an innocent person suffers whose parents, maybe their parents screwed up, maybe their grandparents screwed up? Does that system seem to make sense? And Job says, no, it doesn't make sense. Let the people who did wrong get punished. So he says, first of all, it doesn't seem to happen that the wicked get punished. And if you're going to throw at me the theology that sometimes it's delayed, that doesn't seem right. He says that. So why don't, people get punished? Why does that system, how can that system work now? I mean, he doesn't say that, but the writer is essentially saying that right now, right? So, Job asks a good question, right? A bad person doesn't care what happens to their kids. To some extent, what do they care, right? What does that guy care about the fate of his family, right? The guy's already proven he doesn't care about other people. Does he really care about his family? Now, you and I could say there's bad people who, some mafia guy who cares about his kids, doesn't want to see his kids, suffer. But, at the end of the day, if he really cares about his family, he wouldn't have done bad things. Went to put his family, set his family up for that kind of thing. So, look, Job basically said, first of all, it doesn't make sense because evil people, you're not punishing an evil person by punishing their kids because he doesn't care. And even if that is the case, let the person get punished who deserves to be punished. So everything that Job has said now to his friends and to us, to God, it's a fair point. So that is the next cycle. That's the second cycle. We have one more cycle, and that's what we're going to finish with today. And that is the next line of his friends. They start off, right? Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. We've had 2 of those rounds. This is the last round. So there's 3 friends and 3 rounds. And by the way, as I mentioned, there's one more bonus guy that we're not going to get to today. Here's Eliphaz coming back.
Eliphaz the Temanite said in reply, "Can a man be of use to God? A wise man benefit him? Does Shaddai gain if you are righteous? Does he profit if your conduct is blameless? Is it because of your piety that he arraigns you and enters into judgment with you?"
And again, we want to point out, I didn't mention this before. Shaddai is definitely one of the names that's used for God here, which, some people have speculated the reason why Shaddai is used. And we have had Shaddai before. It's not a frequent name for God, right? Usually we use the Yud He Vav He name. Sometimes we obviously use the word Elohim. Why do we use Shaddai? Well, it leads to the possibility that, again, Job and his friends are not Jews, that they are God-fearing people who live outside of the land of Israel, right? We already know that he lives in the land of Uz, which is maybe in today, again, we would say Saudi Arabia or Jordan. He lives on the eastern side of Israel, or of where Israel is. And maybe he called God Shaddai because that's what they did in that part of the world. They called God oftentimes Shaddai. The name El Shaddai is a name that's used for God. It's a legitimate name, but we just don't use it a lot. It's not a name that we use a lot. So it is used here. What? We do sometimes, but we don't use it a lot. We're not, it's just not, it's not that it's not a Hebrew word. It probably is connected to some Hebrew words. We're not exactly sure what the origin of the name or what Shaddai means, but it's not used a lot, but it is used sometimes. And it is also, again, one of the reasons why the letter Shin is a representation of God's name. But some people have speculated that the reason why Job uses it, or the writer of Job throws it into Job's mouth, is because and his friends, is because these people are not living in the land of Israel. But the name Eliphaz and the name Elihu that we're about to have God's name in it, El, the name for El in them, which again, the name El is in all the other names that we know, like, Eliyahu, Samuel, Shmuel, all those names that have El in them. So it's not like they don't have El names in the story, but we also have this name for Shaddai, which again is not a common name for God, but it is totally legitimate. We've had it before, but oftentimes when we've had it, it's been put in the mouth of people who are not Hebrews. So, but again, the origin of the name Shaddai is there's speculation of where it comes from. Some people say it's connected to the mountains. Some people say it's connected to the word for shadim, which are perhaps breasts, which is an interesting idea, that the mountains are like the Tetons. Anyways, we don't know. I mean, biblical scholars argue over where the name Shaddai comes from. All right, but it is clearly being used for God. Yep.
You know that your wickedness is great and that your iniquities have no limit. You exact pledges from your fellows without reason and leave them naked, stripped of their clothes. You do not give the thirsty water to drink. You deny bread to the hungry. The land belongs to the strong. The privileged occupy it. You have sent away widows empty-handed. The strength of the fatherless is broken. Therefore, snares are all around you, and sudden terrors frighten you, or darkness, so that you cannot see. A flood of waters covers you. God is in the heavenly heights. See the highest stars. How lofty. You say, what can God know? Can he govern through the dense cloud? The clouds screen him, so he cannot see as he moves about the circuit of heaven. Have you observed the immemorial path that evil men have trodden? How they were shriveled up before their time and their foundation poured out like a river? They said to God, leave us alone. What should I do about it? But it was he who filled their houses with good things. The thoughts of the wicked are beyond me. The righteous, seeing it, rejoiced. The innocent laughed with scorn. Surely their substance was destroyed and their remnant consumed by fire. Be close to him and wholehearted. Good things will come to you thereby. Accept instruction from his mouth. Lay up his words in your heart. If you return to Shaddai, you will be restored. If you banish iniquity from your tent, if you regard treasure as dirt, Ophir gold as stones of the wadi, and Shaddai be your treasure, and precious silver for you. When you seek the favor of Shaddai and lift up your face to God, you will pray to him, and he will listen to you, and you will pay your vows. You will decree, and it will be fulfilled, and light will shine upon your affairs. When others sink low, you will say it is pride, for he saves the humble. He will deliver the guilty. He will be delivered through the cleanness of your hands.
And again, this is pray to God and everything will be okay. Make yourself right with God, everything will be good. Again, he uses the name El and Shaddai, by the way, synonymously, because we had that in our line. We don't see, again, the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. We don't see the Lord, the name we don't pronounce, the Jewish name for God, which, again, is one of the reasons why people say that the people in this story are not Jews. They don't refer to God by that name. We'll get to that in a second. We'll get to that.
But doesn't the Yud He Vav He name doesn't show up in Esther at all, correct?
Well, yes, but when we talk about, but God isn't mentioned, right? God isn't mentioned in God's name isn't mentioned in the book. Look, the when we look at the beginning of the story, the beginning, chapter 1, we have God's name being used as Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the Lord. You understand? So it's not like the Lord is not mentioned in this book, right? As the Lord, as God, the name we don't say, the Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh name, the Jewish name for God. But interestingly, it's not used by the characters. The characters used El and Shaddai. The speculation being that they are not Jewish and they don't refer to God as Lord. They don't say Hashem, right? If they're Jewish, they would say Hashem. They're not. They say Shaddai, or they say God. So that's an interesting feature of the book. Is there a deeper comment about it? Yeah, probably. Right. So, a second. So that's something we have to take into consideration, that there is a intention in the way this was written, and why does it keep doing that? It keeps jumping out of order. So let us go to where we left off, and we're moving through the stories. I mean the stuff. Went a little too far. Okay, so
What does it mean he will deliver the guilty?
that God will deliver the guilty. What does the King James have for it in line 30? Okay, what does it say? Ugh. Yeah, so the word Enaki, they translate as island of the innocent. Enaki, they completely translated differently. Um, and they actually, that's a complete different reading of it.
Hmm.
So essentially, these translators translate the word as Enaki as not naki, not clean. So it's a completely different reading. I mean, literally, this is an example of a translation giving you completely different understanding. But the feeling was is that God will do the right thing. He will deliver the guilty, uh, and he will. Um, but it's probably better not to translate it as he will deliver the guilty, which is why King James is probably. What does your translation have, John? In the has yours got the same thing? He will deliver the guilty for line 30. Yeah, it's this. It's the same. It's the same translation. Um, but essentially, what he's it's kind of connected to the previous line, which is God will fix. God will do the right thing. God is going to do the right thing. So interesting, right? It's a weird line to translate. It's weird to translate it so differently in those two things. That's pretty wild. So it's an affirmation of traditional. I mean, the understanding is that he's speaking traditional theology to him, which is again, God will take care of the righteous. Yeah, yeah. Well, the implication is that Job, you will be taken care of if you do the right thing, right? Once you cleanse yourself of your sin, you will be okay. Which he just they keep telling him that, right? Which is Job, you just admit that you did something wrong.
Job said in reply, "Today again my complaint is bitter. My strength is spent on account of my groaning. Would that I knew how to reach him, how to get to his dwelling place. I would set out my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would learn what answers he had for me and know how he would reply to me. Would he contend with me overbearingly? Surely he would not accuse me. There the upright would be cleared by him, and I would escape forever from my judge. But if I go east, he's not there. West, I still do not perceive him. North, since he is concealed, I do not behold him. South, he is hidden, and I cannot see him. But he knows the way I take. Would he essay me? I should emerge as pure as gold. I have followed in his tracks, kept his way without swerving. I have not deviated from what his lips commanded. I have treasured his words more than my daily bread. He is one. Who can dissuade him? Whatever he desires, he does. For he will bring my term to an end, but he has many more such at his disposal. Therefore, I am terrified at his presence. When I consider, I dread him. God has made me faint-hearted. Shaddai has terrified me. Yet I am not cut off by the darkness. He has concealed, sorry, you scrolled too fast.
Sorry.
He has concealed the thick gloom from me. Why are times for judgment not reserved by Shaddai? Even those close to him cannot foresee his actions. People remove boundary stones, they carry off flocks and pasture them. They lead away the donkey of the fatherless and seize the widow's bull as a pledge. They chase the needy off the roads. All the poor of the land are forced into hiding. Like the wild asses of the wilderness, they go about their tasks, seeking food. The wilderness provides each with food for his lads. They harvest fodder in the field and glean the late grapes in the vineyards of the wicked. They pass the night naked for lack of clothing. They have no covering against the cold. They are drenched by the mountain rains and huddle against the rock for lack of shelter. They snatch the fatherless infant from the breast and seize the child of the poor as a pledge. They go about naked for lack of clothing and hungry, carry sheaves. Between rows of olive trees, they make oil, and thirsty, they tread the wine presses. Men groan in the city. The souls of the dying cry out, yet God does not regard it as a reproach. They are rebels against the light. They are strangers to its ways and do not stay in its path. The murderer arises in the evening to kill the poor and needy, and at night he acts the thief. The eyes of the adulterer watch for twilight, thinking, no one will glimpse me then. He masks his face. In the dark, they break into houses. By day, they shut themselves in. They do not know the light. For all of them, morning is darkness. It is then that they discern the terror of darkness. May they be flotsam on the face of the water. May their portion in land be accursed. May none turn aside by way of their vineyards. May drought and heat snatch away their snow waters, and Sheol those who have sinned. May the womb forget him. May he be sweet to the worms. May he be no longer remembered. May wrongdoers be broken like a tree. May he consort with a barren woman who bears no child. Leave his widow deprived of good. Though he has the strength to seize bulls, may he live with no assurance of survival. Yet God gives him the security on which he relies and keeps watch over his affairs. Exalted for a while, let them be gone. Be brought low and shrivel like mallows and wither like the heads of grain. Surely no one can confute me or prove that I am wrong.
And so Job says the wicked are all over the place. They're getting away with it all over the place. They're stealing from the most vulnerable, and they get away with it. Right? And it's
Sure
happening all over the place. And it doesn't seem fair. So that is his answer again to his friends, which are, really? You tell me where all this, where's the system working? So that's what he says to his friend. Now we'll read the last part of this cycle, which is his second friend. This last two chapters were Job's response. Now this is the one to Bildad.
Bildad the Shuhite said in reply, dominion and dread are his. He imposes peace in his heights. Can his troops be numbered? On whom does his light not shine? How can man be in the right before God? How can one born of woman be cleared of guilt? Even the moon is not bright, and the stars are not pure in his sight. How much less man, a worm, the son of man, a maggot.
That's only 6 verses, that chapter. This is Bildad's. It's almost like his friends are getting tired of this, but he basically, again, shoots back with, you don't understand God. God's so much bigger than you. You're not even in the same realm as God, right? And here's Job.
Then Job said in reply, you would help without having the strength. You would deliver with arms that have no power. Without having wisdom, you offer advice and freely give your counsel. To whom have you addressed words? Whose breath issued from you? The shades tremble beneath the waters and their denizens. Sheol is naked before him. Abaddon has no cover. He it is who stretched out Zephon over chaos, who suspended earth over emptiness. He wrapped up the waters in his clouds, yet no cloud burst under their weight. He shuts off the view of his throne, spreading his cloud over it. He drew a boundary on the surface of the waters at the extreme, where light and darkness meet. The pillars of heaven tremble, astounded at his blast. By his power, he stilled the sea. By his skill, he struck down Rahab. By his wind, the heavens were calmed. His hand pierced the elusive serpent. These are but glimpses of his rule, the mere whisper that we perceive of him. Who can absorb the thunder of his mighty deeds?
Okay, so that is Job. When his friend is done, Job replies, "Yeah, God is huge. God's bigger than all this." And now Job, this direction is again. Job says in okay, all this is true about God, and I'm going to even go bigger than what God, with what God does. Because again, he invokes all these mystical, powerful, primeval monsters. And here's what Job says in a really powerful way. After all saying all that, here's what he says.
Job again took up his theme and added, by God who has deprived me of justice, by Shaddai who has embittered my life. As long as there is life in me and God's breath is in my nostrils, my lips will speak no wrong, nor my tongue utter deceit. Far be it from me to say you are right. Until I die, I will maintain my integrity. I persist in my righteousness and will not yield. I shall be free of reproach as long as I live. May my enemy be as the wicked, my assailant as the wrongdoer. For what hope has the impious man when he is cut down, when God takes away his life? Will God hear his cry when trouble comes upon him, when he seeks the favor of Shaddai, calls upon God at all times? I will teach you what is in God's power, and what is with Shaddai I will not conceal. All of you have seen it, so why talk nonsense? This is the evil man's portion from God, the lot that the ruthless receive from Shaddai. Should he have many sons? They are marked for the sword. His descendants will never have their fill of bread. Those who survive him will be buried in a plague, and their widows will not weep. Should he pile up silver like dust, lay up clothing like dirt? He may lay it up, but the righteous will wear it, and the innocent will share the silver. The house he built is like a bird's nest, like a booth the watchman makes. He lies down, a rich man, with his wealth intact. When he opens his eyes, it is gone. Terror overtakes him like a flood. A storm wind makes off with him by night. The east wind carries him far away, and he is gone. It sweeps him from his place. Then it hurls itself at him without mercy. He tries to escape from its force. It claps its hands at him and whistles at him from its place. There is a mine for silver, and a place where gold is refined. Iron is taken out of the earth, and copper smelted from rock. He sets bounds for darkness. To every limit man probes, to rocks in deepest darkness. They open up a shaft far away from where men live, in places forgotten by wayfarers, destitute of men, far removed. Earth, out of which food grows, is changed below as if into fire. Its rocks are a source of sapphires. It contains gold dust, too. No bird of prey knows the path to it. The falcon's eye has not gazed upon it. The proud beasts have not reached it. The lion has not crossed it. Man sets his hand against the flinty rock and overturns mountains by the roots. He carves out channels through rock. His eyes behold every precious thing. He dams up the sources of the streams so that hidden things may be brought to light. But where can wisdom be found? Where is the source of understanding? No man can set a value on it. It cannot be found in the land of the living. The deep says, it is not in me. The sea says, I do not have it. It cannot be bartered for gold. Silver cannot be paid out as its price. The finest gold of Ophir cannot be weighed against it. nor precious onyx, nor sapphire. Gold or glass cannot match its value, nor vessels of fine gold be exchanged for it. Coral and crystal cannot be mentioned with it. A pouch of wisdom is better than rubies. Topaz from Nubia cannot match its value. Pure gold cannot be weighed against it. But whence does wisdom come? Where is the source of understanding? It is hidden from the eyes of all living, concealed from the fowl of heaven. Abaddon and death say, we have only a report of it. God understands the way to it. He knows its source, for he sees to the ends of the earth, observes all that is beneath the heavens. When he fixed the weight of the winds, set the measure of the waters, when he made a rule for the rain and a course for the thunderstorms, then he saw it and gauged it. He measured it and probed it. He said to man, see, fear of the Lord is wisdom. To shun evil is understanding.
And again, and this is where we're going to finish today, that line, right? Yirad Adonai, right? Fear of God. He didn't actually call, interestingly, he didn't use the word Yud He Vav He. He used Adonai. He used Lord. But Job is, again, quoting everything that we've read up until now, which is that God knows all these things. There is no understanding anywhere else except for within God. We didn't quite get to where, I mean, we read a lot. We read 20 chapters today. We don't normally read 20 chapters of a text, and these were not short chapters. Some of them were 25, 35 lines. There were a couple short ones, but overall they were normally, about 20 something lines, 29, 30 lines. So we read quite a lot. We have Job continues in the next chapter, and then next week we're going to we're not meeting next week. We're off next week. I'm in England, but when we get back, we're going to finish off with we're going to read about this friend Elihu who pops up out of nowhere. We're going to get to this guy right here. And we're going to read about this next guy that comes up. So the next time we meet in 2 weeks, we're going to read Elihu, and depending on how much we read, I will tell you, you have to be here in 2 weeks to actually see it. After Elihu is done speaking, guess who gets a little chance to speak? Yes? Anybody?
Sorry?
Guess who gets to speak?
God
Anyone?
gets to speak.
God gets to speak. That's right. Chapter 38, we're going to read God gets to speak. And here it says, Vaya'an Adonai. The Lord, the Yud He Vav He name, we're going to hear God call to him. So that's what we're going to read in 2 weeks. We're going to hear God. God will get to speak. I mean, after all this talk about God, we should have God be able to respond. And that's what, again, some people say is the crux of this story is, the climax of the story really is God speaking. So we got to figure out what it is that Job is teaching us, because, as I said, we don't quote any other part of this book, with the exception of the introduction, when, again, the prologue, when Job says, God, you've taken away everything from me. You've given and you've taken. We will have a quote. There's one quote coming up from next week that is part of our prayers. And we'll get to that. And we get to hear God's point, which I guess is the point of the book, which is setting up God to answer for his world and for all the things that don't seem to make sense in this world. Will you like the answer? I don't know. But you're going to get it. You're going to get it from God's own words, from the tempest. God speaking to us, speaking to Job, speaking to all of us, in essence. So Yes, we do not have class next week, but we do have class tomorrow night. Wednesday night, we'll be reading about martyrdom and what that means in Judaism. It's always an interesting topic to discuss. And then, of course, on the next night, on Thursday night, we have Purim. It's 7 p.m. here. So please be with us for Purim and a chance to celebrate and go through our take on obviously the story of Esther, which we will read, my friends. We will get to Esther. After we read Job, we go into the next part of the Bible of Ketuvim, which are the Megillot. Starts off with Song of Songs that we read at Passover, coming up. Ruth, Shavuot, Lamentations, Tisha B'Av, Ecclesiastes, Sukkot, and then all the way back around. You got to come all the way back around to Purim, to Esther. So it's the fifth of the Megillot, and the Megillot, therefore, are not chronological from when they took place. They are chronological from when we read them during the year. Starting the year in Passover, we don't, of course, start the year in Passover, but our ancestors did, and they read Song of Songs in the spring, and Ruth.
Maybe we should do that.
Maybe we should.
Even if they're
But
not
these are
in
these are Megillot. These are the Megillot. The Megillot are kind of short. Song of Songs is, as you can see, is 8 chapters. Ruth, how many chapters is Ruth? Somebody? Does anyone know? 4. Only 4 chapters. And so these are short books. Esther is actually pretty long. Ecclesiastes, by the way, is pretty long. It's 12 chapters, but it's also it's sayings. It's not story. The rest of most of Esther, it's 10 chapters of Esther. That will probably take us, probably 3 weeks to read Esther. So, yeah, that's coming up. Before we know it, we're going to be in the Megillot. Except we're not going to get to the Megillah that we're about to celebrate until probably
summer.
a couple months. But we will get to it. All right, everybody. Thank you. And thank you, Rosemary, for reading Job and giving us some things to think about, maybe even some nightmares. But the next time we read, we'll see. We may finish it in 2 weeks, or we may have 2 more readings of Job. But we definitely wanted to get through it pretty fast so you can digest it and deal with it. So thank you very much, and we'll see you.
Thank you, everybody.
See you soon. Hag Sameach and happy Purim,
Hag
everybody.
Sameach, everybody.
Great rest of Adar. Candy, that's right. Don't. All right.